Hi there, I'm Izzy Kaplan from Cape Media Center, and I'm here with Andrew Gottlieb, Executive Director of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. And we're going to talk about an issue that has raised some concerns from Cape Cod residents and environmentalists. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about this.
Yeah, no problem. So the issue we're talking about is the fact that the National Guard has gotten clearance to put a machine gun range at Joint Base Cape Cod in Bourne. This effort has gotten a lot of flack from locals and even political figures who are concerned about the potential environmental and safety impacts this could have on Cape Cod. This week, the Guard released their finding of no significant impact report. So now the final step to approval is through the Massachusetts Environmental Management Commission. After the Guard notified the public that they plan to release the finding of no significant impact report, Andrew and APCC voiced opposition to the National Guard's actions in a recent statement to members. So I'm going to put that on screen now and just read a little quote from that. While the finding has not yet been released, it represented a full steam ahead approach by the Guard to force this project on Cape Cod with no regard for the requirement to protect the water supply of the Upper Cape or to the impact of the largest forest clear-cut on Cape Cod in recent memory, and the resultant impact on climate from the loss of mature forest cover. This project remains substantively flawed and poorly cited. While not the last step in the process, this action is a clear and unmistakable statement of intent by the Guard Bureau to proceed no matter the extent of public opposition or environmental damage that may result. So one of the big issues here is that even though the Guard reported a finding of no significant impact, many opposers believe that the standards aren't high enough and the amount of opposition to this issue should be taken into account in the decision. Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, and Will Keating signed a letter stating that state and federal government has an obligation to take all possible care in determining any potential impacts that the construction of this range may incur, even if that means going above and beyond what is required by the statute. So now I'm going to talk to Andrew about some of APCC's concerns around this issue to help us break it down. First, do you want to talk a little bit about APCC's mission?
Sure. APCC, Association to Preserve Cape Cod, is a 52-year-old environmental advocacy and education organization. We've been around working on issues of significance to the environment and the residents of Cape Cod since 1968, when we were founded in response to another federal bad idea, which was the proposed dredging of the Nauset Marsh to wipe out that habitat to make a deep water port. And now we find ourselves 52 years later, still engaged with the federal government in issues of concern about protecting the water resources and land resources of the Cape Cod, this time in the context of the proposed machine gun range at Joint Base Cape Cod.
Mm-hmm. Well, we thank you for all that you do, because it's so important to preserve the environment of Cape Cod, especially because we're kind of a at-risk community, especially with climate change now. So can you talk a little bit about what exactly the National Guard plans to do on the property if this plan moves forward? Like, how much land is going to be cleared? What exactly are they going to be changing?
Sure. So what the proposal is right now is to build a multi-purpose machine gun range, adding it to some existing smaller ranges that currently exist at the base. The project would consist of the construction and operation of an 8-lane machine gun range that would require almost 200 acres of land disturbance, including 170 acres of forest that would be clear cut to accommodate the range footprint, small arms, range operations, control area facilities, utilities, access and maintenance, roads development, and fire breaks to reduce wildlife hazards from tracers and other ignition sources. That's by their own environmental statement. Project plan would also include approximately almost 5,200 acres, which is about a third of the 15,000 acre Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve, would be required for the range to accommodate the surface danger zones where projectiles fired on the range would land. So you have, in total, the disruption of a third of the 15,000 acres of the Upper Cape water supply reserve for this particular activity. You know, and our concerns are multiple. There's substantive concerns about the impact of the loss of that contiguous forest area for both water supply protection purposes, recharge for the Upper Cape water supply, which serves and provides recharge to groundwater that provides support to 5 Upper Cape towns, water supplies, and then also just the carbon impact of that kind of loss of mature forested area and the carbon sequestration that that would provide, in addition to other operational concerns, which we're happy to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mention any of the other operational concerns.
Sure. So, you know, there's the, you know, at its core, our concern is that the Guard has done an environmental assessment in which they've self-evaluated their own project and determined that in all areas, habitat, land use impacts, climate impacts, noise, land use cover, air quality, that this project has no significant long-term adverse impacts, which is just simply, on the face of it, an absurd conclusion to come to. And because under the law, if you find that you have no long-term adverse impacts, you're under no legal obligation to mitigate those impacts because you self-determined that they don't exist. And I think our concern here is that after putting the environmental assessment out for public comment, they received almost 400 public comments, 90% of which are all in opposition to the project. So what you have here is people like ourselves raising concerns about the validity of the assessment and the seriousness with which the Guard Bureau is taking clear and obvious environmental impacts and saying that they have not met the standard of the law. This is not an instance where people are saying, you know, we don't want to have military training or anything like that. This is really a question of, have they met their obligation under Massachusetts state law to ensure that training activities on the base are compatible with and consistent with the long-term protection of the water supply? And the simple and obvious answer to us is no, it hasn't. You know, the assessment, frankly, is riddled with a lot of what I consider sort of, you know, governmental military doublespeak. You know, the discussion about land use cover seems to indicate that leaving the forest alone, the no action alternative, would, quote, have long-term potential significant adverse impacts on future land use from a reduction in training use of Camp Edwards. If the objective here is to protect the long-term suitability of the forest land, leaving it in its natural state can't be an adverse impact on the forest. The forest is adversely impacted by cutting it all down. And yet they've somehow twisted this analysis to indicate that leaving it alone in its natural state is the less preferable alternative. And the analysis is riddled with those kind of Orwellian counterintuitive conclusions that they use to justify not having to do anything meaningful to offset the impact. And another example I'll give you is that they propose as a mitigation to turn over the long-term management of a number of acres of forested land to another organization to manage that. And the problem with that is it's shown or characterized as some great conservation offset. They're taking land that's already in forested open space protection and saying it will remain so. And somehow not adding to the forest that's protected somehow is a mitigation for losing 100 and almost 200 acres that they would clear cut. So there's a lot of problems with this. And, you know, rather than heed the interests of the public that has legitimate concerns based on past history of widespread, broad-based contamination of the water supply for the Upper Cape communities, rather than pay attention to that, they are just forging ahead. And I think what they are finding is that the community has every right to be skeptical of the assertions and promises that have been made, because the mistrust is well earned and is based on experience, that this particular group of leaders at the base seem to not understand that for the last 20 years, we have not had conflict between military operations, training activities on the base, and the interests and needs of the surrounding communities for environmental protection, because there had been open, clear, frank, and honest dialogue between the parties. And that had resulted in a lot of activity at the base being managed in a way that made it compatible. For whatever reason, they're walking away from that motto with this project, and rather than engage in meaningful dialogue with the community, listen to the concerns and come up with alternatives to address those concerns, they are basically seem committed to ramming this down our throats.
So the Guard has no obligation to take into consideration the public comments or anything like that?
Well, you know, in a rational world, the purpose of the public comment process is to hear from the public and to respond to it, not to dismiss. So the Guard has made the case that they have followed all the necessary legal steps. And I guess you could argue maybe they have, but it's been more of a check the box exercise from our perspective than a meaningful way to gather comment, respond to the comment, and therefore improve the project. So they believe that they have adhered to the requirements of the law. We think, if anything, the most that we could say is that they've given lip service to the requirements of the law, but haven't taken it particularly seriously.
Mm-hmm. So what are the next steps? So I know it's through the Environmental Management Commission. What exactly do they do? What does that mean?
Sure. So when the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve was created back, I believe, around 2002, as a response to the need to change the way that training was handled relative to the impacts on the environment and reflective of the experience that people had had, the state created something called the Environmental Management Commission, which is an organization that's comprised of the three environmental commissioners from the State Department of Environmental Protection, State Department of Fisheries and Game, and the State Department of Conservation and Recreation. And they have the final say over the evaluation of and compatibility of military training activities within the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve. So this project has to go to the Environmental Management Commission for a hearing and for an up or down vote on whether the proposal as it's been being presented to them meets the standards of the Massachusetts statute that created the EMC.
Mm-hmm. And that would be the final step to approving this issue?
That would be, to our minds, that's the final administrative step. In other words, the last non-judicial step in the process. Certainly, there's the opportunity to engage in judicial review of the extent to which the Guard Bureau has meaningfully complied with the law, and that is certainly an alternative that's being evaluated by a number of interested parties on this. But we remain hopeful that the Environmental Management Commission, as an extension of the Baker administration, and given the administration's long-term commitment to protecting the environment of the Upper Cape, that they will see this for what it is, which is a failed attempt to push through a project that's ill-conceived and in the wrong location for the wrong purposes, and stop it in its tracks.
Mm-hmm. So what is APCC and what are other groups doing to prevent this project from moving forward? Is there anything you can do at this point, or are you just kind of voicing your opinions?
No, and we have engaged constructively in reviewing the analysis. We've commented formally to the Guard Bureau in its draft assessment process. We have ensured that the public had full awareness of what was being proposed and what the broader public view through the comment process has been about the project by first requesting release of all the public comments. And then when that was not forthcoming, we filed a public records request under the Freedom of Information Act, which originally the Guard Bureau denied, and then they finally relented when they realized that the public did have a right to public comments. What is more public than the public's own comments on a project? And we will be working constructively with the Environmental Management Commission to make sure that they have a full and complete understanding of both the public record, what is being proposed, and what the real and demonstrable impacts of the project will be, and remain hopeful that, unlike the Guard Bureau, the EMC will take account of the realities of the proposal and take the only appropriate action that they can take with this particular project proposal as it currently stands, and reject it as incompatible with the protection of the water supply resource on which it sits.
Mm-hmm. So if people watching this program right now are feeling similarly to you and want to voice their opposition, is there anything that they can do right now that you would suggest?
Well, I think the proper venue is through the public process that comes from the EMC, and what we will be doing as an organization is providing regular input on status and to whom comments should be directed to our membership, and also posting all that information on our website. So I would suggest that people who are concerned about this issue, as well as a broad range of other environmental issues on the Cape, one method to do that is to join APCC. We're a membership organization, but also you can follow along with regular updates on our website at apcc.org, and we will be providing specific guidance to people on the right time and to whom to direct their concerns about this project when the schedule is set by the Environmental Management Commission to take it up.
All right, great. So that's apcc.org if people want to check it out. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap it up today?
I just think that people need to be mindful that the way things have worked for the past 20 years has served both the interests of the environment and the interests of the training needs for the military extremely well. And all that we're asking for is to go back to the model that worked, as opposed to being forced to live with the model that resulted in widespread and ubiquitous contamination of the drinking water for the Upper Cape, which seems to be what this current leadership crew is committed to going back to for reasons that escape the rest of us. So, this is our common resource. We have a say in how it is utilized by state law. The Guard works for us, and the Guard has an obligation as a steward of these resources to not take unreasonable risk with our drinking water, because they're here for a short time. The rest of us are here because we made a commitment to the region, and we have to live with and deal with the effects of what they do. So we don't want to go back to the bad old days when we were in constant conflict with the Guard and had to rely on hundreds of millions of dollars of public expenditure to clean up a resource that, with better stewardship, didn't need to be contaminated, and we now know doesn't need to be contaminated because you can do things better. This is just a bad example of going back to a situation that served everyone poorly. It's going to take a fight because it's, by all indications, the Guard Bureau is tone deaf to the comments, concerns, and history of this particular site. So we want to protect and preserve it. It's going to be up to the residents of the Cape to rise up and say no.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and your opinion on this. And if people want to check it out again, apcc.org, you can become a member and they'll let you know what actions can be taken on this issue as it moves forward with the EMC. All right, well, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.